Okay, hello everyone. Okay, so the next program is ingredient adjuster. Okay, so a cookie recipe calls for the following ingredients: 1.5 cups of sugar, 1 cup of butter, 2.7 cups of flour. The recipe produces 48 cookies with this amount of the ingredients. Write a program that asks the user how many cookies he or she wants to make, and then displays the number of cups of each ingredient needed for the specified number of cookies. So for 48 cookies, you will need 1.5 cups of sugar, 1 cup of butter, 2.7 cups of flour. So if the user, let's say, wants to know how many cups of each of these ingredients he or she will need to make, let's say, 10 cookies, the program should calculate that. So if the user types in, let's say, I want to make 60 cookies, how many cups of each of these ingredients will I need? So that's the job of the program. All right, so let's first go ahead and store a couple of these variables in a couple of these values in variables. So, all right, so let's say the recipe produces 48 cookies. All right, so before any of that, before we start the program, let me give an analogy. Try to explain the idea, well, what we're going to use to solve this program. We're going to use ratio and proportion to solve it. Okay, so let me go ahead and type in a few things. So I'm going to say if 48 cookies is equal to 1, let's start with cups of sugar, and then after I'll do the rest. 1.5 cups of sugar. Okay, so all right. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and type a few things here. So I'm going to say, let's try to space this out nicely. First, let me just change this. All right, I'll keep it like that. All right, let me just do this so it looks a bit organized. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and copy the same thing for, again, this is just to explain the idea behind the program. All right, 1 cup of butter. So these are comments. Okay, these are not part of the program. It's just comments I'm going to use to explain the idea of ratio and proportion. That's what we're going to apply to solve this. It can get confusing for some people, so I'll go ahead and explain it. So 2.7 cups of flour. Okay. All right. So, like I said, if the user enters, let's say he or she wants to make 20 cookies. If the user enters, let's say, 20 cookies, the program should calculate how many cups of each of these ingredients he or she will need. So this is basically the idea behind it. If 48 cookies is going to give us 1.5 cups of sugar, and the user enters, let's say, 10. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and assume the user entered 10 for number of cookies. I'm going to assume. Okay, now let me bring this back. Sorry for all the, the roughness. Okay, I'm just trying to organize it. All right. So we are assuming the user typed in 10. Okay, we are assuming the user can type in anything, but we are assuming the user typed in 10. All right. So if 48 cookies is equal to 1.5 cups of sugar, then 10 cookies is going to give us what? The same thing here. If 48 cookies gives us 1 cup of butter, I mean, or what I mean by gives us is, if 48 cookies, okay, if we use 1 cup of butter to make 48 cookies, then how many cups of butter will we need to make 10 cookies? Okay, if for 48 cookies we use 2.7 cups of flour, then how many cups of flour are you going to need for 10 cookies? That's what the question is asking. So this is how ratio and proportion works. If 48 cookies is equal to 1.5 cups of sugar, then 10 cookies obviously is going to give us less. Okay, obviously it's going to give us less. So because 48 gives us 1.5, 10 cookies is going to give us less. So if less, that's the idea behind ratio proportion. If less, then more divide. Okay, and what I mean by more divide is this. The bigger number, the more. Okay, the bigger number is going to go under 10. So it's going to be 10 divided by 48 times 1.5. Okay, so because 10 is going to give us less, if less, then more divides. And what I mean by more divides is the bigger number, the more. Okay, 48 is going to go under 10, and we're going to multiply by 1.5. So let me use the same idea for this. If 48 is equal to 1, then 10 is going to give us less. So if less, then more divides. And what I mean by more divides is 48 goes under 10. So it's going to be 10 divided by 48, and then we'll end up multiplying by what's on the right here, which is 1. So the same for this. 48 gives us 2.75 cups of flour. So obviously 10 is going to give us less cups of flour. So if less, then more divides. And what I mean by more divides is 48 will go under 10, then we end up multiplying by 2.75. Let's assume the user typed in 60 cookies. How many cups of each of these ingredients will I need for 60 cookies? Okay, so if 48 is equal to 1.5 cups of sugar, then 60 cookies obviously is going to give us more cups of sugar, because 60 is more than 48, and if 48 gives us 1.5, then 60 cookies is going to give us more. So if more, then less divides. So the way ratio proportion works is this: if less, more divides; if more, less divides. Okay, so in this case, because 60 cookies is going to give us more cups of sugar, then less divide. Okay, and what I mean by less divides is the lesser number, the smaller number of these two divides. So it's the one that's going to go under 60. So the smaller number is going to go under 60, and then you multiply by what's on the right, which is 1.5. So in this case, it's going to be 60 divided by 48 times 1.5. Same with this. If 48 is equal to 1, then 60 is going to give us more, and if more, less divides. So this is the small number. 48 is going to go under 60, and we end up multiplying by 1. Okay, so it's going to be 60 divided by 48 times 1. Same with this one also, because 60 is going to give us more cups of flour, less divides. If more, less divides. So less, which is 48, is going to go under 60, and we're going to end up multiplying by what's on the right here, which is 2.75. Okay, so this is just an idea about the program. I'm sorry for over explaining or over talking. If you understand this already, please feel free to skip through the video. If not, then if it's helping, I'm glad. If you still have questions and you don't understand, please comment and I'll explain why I did that. Okay, so now notice that anytime, whether what the user types is small or big, anytime we are doing this calculation, we always divide by 48, and we end up multiplying by what's on the right. We are always dividing by 48, and anytime we do any of this calculation, we are always dividing by 48 and multiplying by 1.5. So if in this case, for example, 60 is going to give us more. So in this case, if more, then less divides. And what I mean by less divides is 48 is going to go under the 60, so it's going to be 60 divided by 48, and we'll multiply by 1.5. So at any time we are dividing by 48 and multiplying by 1.5. In the case where the user entered 10, now 48 gives us 1.5, 10 is going to give us less. So if less, then more divides. More is 48. 48 is the bigger number. So in that case, if less, then more divides. More, 48, is going to go under 10, and we end up multiplying by 1.5. So 10 divided by 48 times 1.5. So at any time we are doing any of this calculation, we are always dividing by 48 and multiplying by what's on the right, which is, in this case, is 1.5. In this case is 1, and in this case is 2.75. So this is just an idea to get, for us to feel we have a sense of the program, or solving the program. Okay, so I'll leave this here. And again, sorry for over explaining this or over talking. I just want to do this so that it's clear to everyone. Okay, so let's go ahead and start the program. All right, so first the program wants us to ask the user how many cookies he or she wants to make. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and call the input function and type, how many cookies do you want to make? Okay, so once we ask the user this and the user types in something, whatever the user types is going to be converted to a string with the input function, because that's what the input function does. It's going to allow the user to type in something, and it's going to return whatever the user typed as a string. But the thing is, we can't use strings in calculations, so we need to convert that string into a number. So even if the user types in a number here, right, it's going to be stored as a string initially. So we need to go ahead and convert what the user typed into a number. In this case, I'm going to convert it into a float, and I'll explain that in a second. So I'm first converting what the user typed, everything that the user typed here, into a float so we can use it. And the reason why I'm converting this to a float and not an integer is because the user can make 4.5 cookies. Okay, people do that. People want to make exactly 4.5 cookies because they want to make, let's say, 4 cookies for 4 old people and maybe a half a cookie for a baby or something. All right, so someone can decide to make 4.5 cookies. So that's why I converted it to a float. So once we do that, once we accept the input from the user and we convert it to a float, we need a place to store it. So I'm going to go ahead and store this into a variable, and I'm going to call that variable user number of cookies. Okay. All right, so I'm going to call that variable user number of cookies. So now we have the number of cookies that the user wants to make. Okay, so the next thing we have to do is basically calculate how many cups of each of these ingredients the user will need. Will need. All right. So first of all, I'm going to go ahead and, because I want to stay organized, I'm going to store some of these values in variables and to just stay organized. So I'm going to store, let's see. I was thinking of storing this in variables and stay organized, but I'm thinking of how to. Okay, so I'll store this 48, okay, as a regular batch of cookies. Okay, the regular batch is, let's say, because I'm saving it regular. I'm naming it. Sorry, guys. I'm naming it for a regular batch of cookies because that's in this question. That's what we are using. That's the regular number they gave us for 48 cookies. We are using this ingredient. It's fixed. Okay, so for these cups of ingredients, we are making 48 cookies out of them. So I'm just going to name it regular batch of cookies. So we know. So based off on that number, okay, we can calculate the rest. So I'm going to name it that. You can name it something that makes sense to you, but I'm going to name mine regular batch of cookies. So regular batch of cookies is now going to be equal to 48 here. Okay. And then with these ingredients, I'm going to also store them in variables. So for 1.5 cups of sugar, that's how many cups of sugar we need to make 48 cookies. So I'm going to name that cups of. These names are long, okay? I like giving my, it doesn't matter if my variable names are long. It just makes it clear in my program. But you can name it something short if you want, okay? But I like to just name mine long, just for clarity. For me, I don't mind at all. Feel free to do that too. Okay, so I'm going to name this 1.5 cups of sugar. I'm going to name it cups of sugar, okay, per 48 cookies. Like, that's a long name, but again, if you want, you can shorten yours. So cups of sugar per 48 cookies is going to be equal to 1.5. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing for the other one. So cups of butter per 48 cookies, because we need 1 cup of butter to make 48 cookies according to this question. So cups of butter per 48 cookies is going to be equal to 1. And then cups of flour per 48 cookies is going to be equal to 2.75. All right, so now we have all the values in variables. So now we can go ahead and calculate how many cups of each of the ingredients. Okay, how many cups of each of the ingredients will the user need, based on what number the user typed here. So if the user wants to make 10, let's go ahead and calculate how many cups of ingredients the user is going to need. Okay, so First, let's go ahead and convert, or let's go ahead and calculate. Okay, not convert. Let's go ahead and calculate how many cups of sugar that the user will need based on the number of cookies they entered here. So remember, to get that cups of sugar, remember we were always dividing by 48 and multiplying by 1.5. Okay, we're dividing the user number of cookies by 48 and multiplying by 1.5. So we're assuming the user typed in 10 in this case. So I'm going to create another variable and we're going to calculate how many cups of ingredients, how many cups of sugar in this case, how many cups of sugar the user is going to need based on this number of cookies. So I'm going to call that variable expected cups of sugar. Okay, so expected cups of sugar is going to be, remember we are dividing by 48 always and multiplying by what's on the right, 1.5. So expected cups of sugar in this case is going to be the user number of cookies. Okay, we are assuming the user typed in 10 here. So user number of cookies, okay, divided by 48. But 48, remember, is stored in this variable, regular batch of cookies. So user number of cookies divided by regular batch of cookies. Okay, I'm going to surround it with parentheses because I want that to take effect. I want that to take effect first. And then we are always multiplying by what's on the right. In this case, for cups of sugar, we are multiplying by 1.5. And 1.5 is stored in this variable, which is cups of sugar per 48 cookies. Okay, so times cups of sugar per 48 cookies. All right, now I've exceeded this line over here. And this line is like a guideline to keep me coding or writing 80 characters on a line. That's like a Python thing, okay? It's just to help me keep 80 characters on a line. All right, so this guideline is just this line here is doing that. So before I before I let's say multiply here, I want to break the line. I want to break the line so that I continue this whole line, continue this line. I want to break this line into two lines, just so I don't exceed this line. Okay, so before I multiply here, before I multiply this, I'm going to break it somewhere around here. But before you break any line in Python, you type in the backslash, then you can go ahead and break it. Okay, you type in the backslash and then you can go ahead and break it. All right, so now we have calculated the expected cups of sugar. Let's do this here. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go ahead and copy this whole thing and change a few variables. All right, so let's go ahead and calculate now expected cups of butter. So I'm going to change this to expected cups of butter. All right, now for expected cups of butter, remember we are always dividing by 48, which is the regular batch of cookies here. So we are dividing the user number of cookies by a regular batch of cookies. Okay, and multiplying in this case by 1, which is cups of butter per 48 cookies. So cups of butter per 48 cookies. All right, so now we're done for expected cups of butter. So expected cups of let's say flour now is what we need to go ahead and calculate. So I have what I copied still in my clipboard, so I'm going to paste it. All right, so now we're going to calculate expected cups of flour. So let me change this to expected cups of flour. Okay, so now for expected cups of flour, remember we are always dividing by 48. Okay, we are dividing the user's number of cookies by 48 always, and then multiplying by 2.75. So you are dividing the user number of cookies by regular batch of cookies, which is 48, and multiplying by 2.75. And 2.75 is cups of flour per 48 cookies. So cups of flour per 48 cookies. So now we have how many cups of sugar the user will need for whatever cookies, whatever number of cookies they typed here, how many cups of butter and how many cups of flour they'll need for whatever number of cookies they typed here. So all we have to do is just display it. So I'm going to go ahead and call the print function just to display it. All right, so I'm going to pass in a couple of arguments into the print function. All right, so I'm going to start with a string and say for 48 cookies, right? So 48 cookies, Oh no, I'm going to type and say for how many number of cookies they typed. Okay, for how many number of cookies they typed. So if they type in 10, it's going to say for 10 cookies. Okay, I want to form a sentence here, like a string here. So for user number of cookies, okay, for whatever number of cookies they typed. So I'm going to go ahead and concatenate this string to user number of cookies. Okay, so for user number of cookies, that's how many cookies they typed. I'm going to go ahead and concatenate it to another string. So for user number of cookies, you will need, okay, now before I do that, this user number of cookies here is an integer. The program will complain if I'm concatenating an integer to a string. Okay, the program will complain and say that it cannot do that implicitly. So that means I have to do that explicitly. I have to do that myself. So I'm going to convert this integer into a string. Again, I do that by using a str function, which is like the string function. I'm converting the user number of cookies into a string and concatenating this whole string to another string. So it shouldn't complain about that. The interpreter should be able to do that. Okay, so now for user number of cookies, you will need, I'm going to go ahead and space this out and concatenate that to, you will need, all right, so let's start with expected cups of sugar. You will need expected cups of sugar. Okay, I'm going to concatenate that with, so you will need, let's say if it's 5, it's going to be, you will need 5 cups of sugar. All right, now before I do that, I think I'm running out of space, and let me take this away. Okay, I think it was because of this panel. I'll break this line, but let me finish typing what I wanted to type. So for user number of cookies, you will need, if this is 5, it's going to be, you will need 5 cups of sugar. All right, comma. All right, so now I've exceeded this line here again. So I want to break it. So before I continue, I'm just going to go ahead, break this line here. Okay, but before I break it, I need a backslash so I can break it. All right, so I'm continuing. You will need, let's say if this is 5 or this is 4, it's going to be, you will need 4 cups of sugar. And I'm going to put a comma. And I'm continuing the string. I'm going to go ahead and concatenate it with another, with expected cups of butter. Before I do that, now again we are trying to concatenate a string to let's say a float here. It's going to complain and say it cannot do that implicitly. So that means we need to go ahead and do it explicitly. That means ourselves. We need to go ahead and do it ourselves. So just like the way I converted this integer to a string, I'm going to go ahead and convert this float to a string using a string function. So str, and I'm going to surround the float into, I'm going to surround the float with parentheses and convert it to a string here. All right, so you will need this number of cups of sugar. And now let's go ahead and say expected cups of butter. Okay, expected cups of butter. Now I need to go ahead and convert that to a string as well. All right, I need to break that also on a new line, so I put the backslash and then I hit enter. So expected cups of sugar, this amount of butter. So all right, so for this number of cookies that for user number of cookies, which is the number of cookies that the user typed, you will need this number, okay, which is, if it's 5, it's going to be 5 cups of sugar. If the number of the cups of butter is, let's say 2, it's going to say 2 cups of butter. I'm going to put a comma, not a comma, I'll just say end. And okay, and I'm going to go ahead and concatenate that. But before I do that, I'm going to break this line. Okay, I type in a backslash first and hit enter, or break it. So cups of butter and the number stored here, which is expected cups of flour. So expected cups of flour. But before I do that, I need to go ahead and convert that also into a string. Okay. I'm going to concatenate it with cups of flour. Okay, so this is going to read for user number of cookies. If the user typed in 5 cookies, it's going to be for 5 cookies, or for 5. Okay, let me just go and add cookies here. So for 5 cookies, comma, you will need expected cups of sugar. It's just converted to a string, so it can display in the print function. All right, so for 5 cookies, I'm just assuming the user typed in 5. You will need, if this is, let's say 1, it's going to say you will need 1 cups, whatever, cups of sugar. Whatever value stored in expected cups of butter, and this amount of cups of flour. If this is, let's say 2, it's going to say 2 cups of flour. Okay, I hope you get the idea behind a string. Okay, so we are done. So let's go ahead and run this and see what happens. So I'm going to debug it and save it. I'll create a new folder for it. And I'll call this ingredient adjuster. And I'll call this ingredient adjuster.py. So ingredient adjuster.py. Okay, so I'll save it and see what happens. Okay, so how many cookies do you want to make? So first of all, let's go ahead and type in 48 cookies, because we know for 48 cookies we are getting this number of cups of each of these ingredients. Okay, so let's do that and see if we are getting the right number. So 48 cookies. Okay, now it says for 48 cookies. Okay, the reason why it's giving us 48.0 is because we declared it as a float. So first of all, let me go ahead and fix some of these spaces. So for 48 space cookies, you will need sugar. Okay, I'll debug one last time and type in 48. So for 48 cookies, I'm expecting these same ingredients, so all right, so for 48.0 cookies, you will need 1.5 cups of sugar, 1.0 cups of butter or cup of butter, and 2.75 cups of flour. So it's calculating correctly. You can go ahead and if the user types in, let's say 48.5, and this is giving us a decimal with so many numbers after the decimal point, you can go ahead and format it. You can use a format function to go ahead and format it. So let me try one last time with another number. So I'm going to type in 46.5. I want to make 46.5 cookies. So for 46.5 cookies, you will need 1.4531 cups of sugar, this number of cups of butter, and this cups of flour. If you want to be precise, you can go ahead and use the format function to you can go ahead and use the format function to round this value all the time. So you can get, let's say, one decimal place, or 0 decimal places, or 3 decimal places. So let me just do an example here. I'm going to just format one of these, the cups of sugar, and you can apply it to the rest of them. Okay, so I'm going to first of all remove the string function. Okay, and I'm going to format this expected cups of sugar. Now expected cups of sugar now takes 2 arguments. The format function takes 2 arguments. Okay, it takes first what it's formatting. We are now formatting the expected cups of sugar. So that's the first argument, and the second argument is how you want it formatted. So it goes in double quotes. So I want this formatted to, first of all, it's a float. So I want it formatted as a float, and I want it formatted to, in this case, I'll just say 2 decimal places. 2 decimal places. Okay, so I am rounding it to 2 decimal places. So in this case, it's going to round this number to 2 decimal places. Now I'm only formatting the sugar. So you can use the same idea to format the rest. So I'm using F because I wanted to format it as a float, and I'm using the precision 0.12, the precision. I mean not 0.12, 0.2. Okay, 0.2, which means round it to 2 decimal places. Okay, not 0.12, 0.2. Round it to 2 decimal places. If you wanted to round it to 1 decimal place, you say 0.1. Okay, round it to 1 decimal place. But I want to round it to 2 decimal places, so I say 0.2. Okay, so I'm going to enter this exact amount, 46.5, and instead of giving me 1.5453125 cups of sugar, I should expect 1.45 cups of sugar. So I'm going to debug this one last time. All right, so now before I run it, okay, the reason why it wouldn't complain when it's concatenating a string to this whole function here is because now this function returns a string. This format function returns a string, and the string that it returns is the formatted version of expected cups of sugar. So now because it's returning a string, the program or the interpreter wouldn't have any problem displaying or concatenating. Okay, the interpreter wouldn't have, because this format function returns a string, the interpreter wouldn't have any problem concatenating a string here to another string, because again this format function returns a string. All right, so I'm going to debug it and then type in 46.5. I think that's what I typed. All right, and hit enter. So now it says for 46 cookies you will need 1.45 cups of sugar. Now remember, this number had a lot of numbers after the decimal place, right? So because we are rounding it to 2 decimal places, we are seeing only 4.5 cups of sugar. These weren't rounded, so that's why it's given us the full figure, all the numbers after the decimal point. If I change this to 0.1 decimal place, now we're going to end up seeing only 1 decimal place after this. So I'm going to go ahead and debug it again. Type in 46.5. Hit enter. Now it's rounded. That's why it's saying 1.5. It's rounded. All right, so I'll take it back to 0.2 and debug it. Type in 46.7. I don't know if someone would decide to ever do that, but yes, if people are trying to be accurate and precise, they want to make 46.7 cookies. I'll change it to 46.5 because that's more realistic and reasonable. I want to make 46.5 cookies. Exactly. So for 46.5 cookies, I would end up needing 1.5 cups of sugar, this number cups of butter, and this number cups of flour. Yeah, so again, you can round these if you want. You can restrict how many cookies the user types to an integer. You can do a whole bunch of stuff with it. So, but at least we know how to format it. We know how to convert a float or an integer to a string, so we can display in the print function. Whatever the format function returns is a string, so the interpreter wouldn't have any problem concatenating a string to another string. So yeah, this program works, and I'm sorry for again over talking or over explaining stuff. I just wanted it to be clear. So if you have any questions at all, please comment down below, and I'll do everything to respond to them. Thank you very much for watching. Take care of yourselves. Have a great day or a great night. Have a great sleep. And I'll see you next time with the next program. Bye-bye.